Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming to today's presser. It will be addressed by Comrade Ambassador Mchangwa, our Secretary for Information and Publicity in the ruling party. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon in the new year. Happy New Year. We all made it, isn't it? We are all here. I know that we ended last year without as many press conferences as I would have liked to brief you. But here, I had pressing family issues to also attend to at that particular time. I'm glad that by and large it's all over. And I'm back to you. And also the part of the permanent Zimbabwe revolution is back with our president having assumed his duties, his official duties, after a well-deserved leave, which was, of course, punctuated with a lot of statecraft, including regional diplomacy, along the way, as he continues to uplift the name of Zimbabwe among African peers, but also on the global stage. I want to say that the star of our president, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, continues to rise. And it was a remarkable thing recently in Dar es Salaam when two major regional blocs sat together, the East African community and the SADC community, to try to address the issues of our important neighbor, the DRC, and their contentious acrimony with Rwanda. And all the heads of states who were there, including the President Museveni, the doyen of African leadership, says it was only possible because Zimbabwe convened the meeting. Otherwise, they would not have had such a meeting of African heads of states. So here we are, African solutions to African problems, and Zimbabwe being at the forefront of that mantra that we can solve our issues. And we are also very happy that in Mozambique the situation has calmed down. The president took his office of oath, and the detractors who were clamoring for regime change, Zimbabwe G40 style, are nowhere near, anywhere in Maputo now. Here there are still some residual issues because we have a huge unemployment problem of young people, which is an African problem, and we need to address it. But by and large, we are very happy President Chapo is in charge. By the way, he is the first leader from Mozambique to come from an area contiguous to Zimbabwe. He comes from Sofala. And the last time he was here, he had his moves with Mbira music. You could almost think that he could have been from this side of the border. So I think the relations between the two countries are going to take a very good turn, because our our neighbor, in terms of politics, and in terms of our provincial affinities with Mozambique, this is the first time we are aligned. Mozambique is a unitary state. Some come from the north, like Nyusi, and a couple had come from the south for some time. But we are happy that Central Mozambique is now President Chapo, and it is coming at a very timely time, a timely occasion, because the economic nexus, the economic evolution between the two countries is going to get closer and get very, very exciting. The main reason why I'm here today is to address an issue which is topical, but which is perennial, and it is the issue of title deeds. You know that recently our president started issuing title deeds to the beneficiaries of our irreversible land reform from the year 2000. There's been some gnashing of teeth since he started doing that with the erstwhile holders of white title deeds from the settler colonial era, fretting that maybe the advent of the new title deeds impinges upon the global compensation agreement which they are negotiating with the government. I want, as a Zimbabwean citizen, because they are fellow Zimbabwean citizens, to assure them that our president negotiates in good faith. He negotiates according to the Constitution of Zimbabwe, and the Constitution of Zimbabwe says that they will be compensated for the loss of improvements on the land on which they were removed, not on the title, but on the improvements. Yes, the negotiations are ongoing. We do have budget constraints, but some of the payments have started being given. And the main point is that our president assures our white compatriots in the global compensation agreement that he is negotiating in good faith, and whatever may arise out of that negotiation, which may be the basis of misunderstanding or contention, he is always happy to have it brought on the table so that as Zimbabweans we do find a common solution to what is essentially a very contentious and difficult issue, where history collides with the population matrix of the country and the colonial era injustices meted out to our people. It's not an easy solution, but Zanu PF has never been shy from addressing very difficult and knotty problems. As a party, we have a history and we think a way will be found. Why am I raising the issue right now? We are aware as a party that since President Trump made an announcement about South Africa, about the land in South Africa, and look, we do have our opinions, but this is a matter which is now topical between two nations, South Africa and Zimbabwe. We do have our opinions as Zimbabwe as a sister ruling party to ANC, but at a time like this, we prefer to keep our opinions to ourselves and try to let diplomacy get a chance to resolve contentious issues between two sovereign nations. So we want to abstain from an engagement in that debate, although there are affinities, but the affinities does not mean there's congruence. There's no congruence between the Zimbabwean land question and the South African land question. The South African land question has been treated as an internal matter between South Africans. We have a different land problem. Ours was a colonial imperial land problem. There is a colonizing power which gave a charter to a private company called BSA Company to come to Zimbabwe and start possessing land. The charter was signed by the Queen of England, Queen Victoria, and it was given to Cecil John Rhodes. And an army was sent here to occupy Mashonaland and Matabeleland, away from Lobengula, our chief, away from Ashayamombe, away from all the other chiefs who would later carry out the resistance against Cecil John Rhodes' marauding pioneer column. So even when we fought, we knew that the legitimacy of this country was impinged upon by Britain. And towards the end of that, when we achieved an armistice, we had to go to London at the Lancaster House Conference to sign an armistice with the imperial power. And they had to restore their governor to come and shepherd the transition process in Zimbabwe, Lord Soames. So the land question in Zimbabwe has got a colonial imperial nature which resides in London. It is not like the South African issue, which is an internal South African affair, because Afrikaners are Africans and we consider them as Africans, and they also want to be considered as Africans. So this is the nuance which is different from the land question in South Africa. The reason we are saying so is that each time there is some rumpus in Washington about Africa, and the president of America is facing the prospect of having to renew the executive sanctions against Zimbabwe about this time of the year. You understand? A lot of excitement starts emanating from opposition circles in Zimbabwe. And I don't know whether I have the news. We have the news day today. You can see the opposition, Mr. Biti. Yeah, he is now starting to make comments about title deeds, about Zimbabwe. And yesterday we know for certain that they convened a meeting in South Africa, at the US Embassy in South Africa, all in an effort at trying to whip up emotions about title deeds and the land in Zimbabwe, so that somehow the oversight, which they believe is an oversight by Trump when he singled out and called out South Africa, it can be corrected, so that Zimbabwe somehow must be found, in the words of the President of America. They just want Zimbabwe on the yoke. They just want Zimbabwe to become the attention of the American president, gratuitously and unnecessarily. Why? Because they believe that if America can do something about Zimbabwe, it can speed up the prospect of them getting to power, sneaking through the back door of foreign support rather than through the front door of electoral politics in Zimbabwe. So these are Zimbabweans who are trying to stir up a situation between Washington and Harare, when Washington, for reasons best known to itself and the American president, did not feel that there was an issue between Zimbabwe and Washington. So we have to put it on record. There are no parallels between the Zimbabwe land question and the South African land question. There isn't. And Mr. Biti, he should stop trying to be peevish. That's what is, this is like a child who always tries to cry when the aunt comes from town. And he knows that the aunt is coming in February because sanctions have got to be removed. So I must somehow get the attention of the American president. And they are also trying to galvanize the Zimbabwean farmers, white farmers, some of them, to become part of this bandwagon. They were being coaxed to go to South Africa and join this movement to say somehow Zimbabwe must be included in the bilateral dispute which is now broken out between Pretoria and Washington. No, we are a sovereign country, our issues are different, and we would like to keep our relations with America as best as they can be, even under the circumstances. And our sincere hope is that President Trump, who is going to be made to remember the executive order of sanctions against Zimbabwe, may actually be made to forget them when the day comes in March, this month, and the executive order is not renewed. This is the ball of contention. This is what's galling Biti. But it's not only him. This agitation also involves Xavier Kasukwere. He is part of this lobbying of the whites in Zimbabwe to try to become part of this nonsensical galvanizing of negative American policy on Zimbabwe. He is involved, Kasukwere, in these frantic efforts. We know because some of the Afrikaners who are engaged in that process, they are not happy at trying to drag the Zimbabwe issue into what is essentially a different problem in South Africa. You may want to recall that Afrikaners are Africans. They do have an affinity for the continent, which has been their home for the past 400 years. That's why they are called Afrikaners. And it is interesting that even when they were being offered to become refugees in America, they're saying, no, 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 no. We are happy here. You know, we may have our issues, but we are happy in Africa. So some of them have a lot of goodwill. And they are the ones who are saying to Zimbabwe, please, can you keep your dogs at home? We don't want them to come and spoil the issue in South Africa. So we have the inside information coming from those who are in the Afrikaners. And they have an anecdote. They say there are two major peoples of of Africa who fought modern wars against the British. The Afrikaners in the Boer War in 1900 to 1904, and they lost. And the Zimbabweans who fought in the 1960s and 70s, and they won. So we have had a common enemy before, being fellow Africans with the Afrikaners. It's not difficult to find an affinity with each other on many issues. So they come to us and tell us what some of our mischievous nationals are trying to do, because it is the month of March and February. It is the month of, it's a mad season in politics because of the prospect of the executive order of the American president on sanctions against Zimbabwe being probably let to slide away. This is their fear. So I wanted to make it clear to you that as Zimbabwe, we have no issues which should be dragged into the South African land affair. But more than that, our president, as I said earlier on, he is constantly looking for the optimal way in which the land question can be made to address injustices, to also compensate, but also to make it productive. For some time, we have been looking at models from other countries which we could consider in terms of how our land question can eventually be optimally resolved. Surprise, surprise, there has been an engagement for quite some time, including when the late Parents Shiri, our Honorable General, was the Minister of Agriculture, with, of all countries, Germany. Germany has got a template about land reform which could very much apply to our situation, because the German template of land reform after the unification of Germany in 1989, remember there was East Germany and West Germany, they had to go through a land reform which had to address what had happened, including the communist dispossessions after Germany became part of the Soviet Union. So they've got a layer of contradictions in their land policy, which they had to resolve after the unification. And they created a bank, I think it's called the BVVD, I will give you the name, let me check again, to resolve those issues. And the beauty about their solution was that because there was no finger pointing, there were Germans coming together. It was holistic and inclusive. I think it is called BVVG. It's called the German Land Reform Agency, and it is led by Mr. Hans Egbert von Anmin. I think that's it. He is the one. This land reform program has done good to Germany. And at the end of it, it has resolved all the issues among the Germans from the East and from the West, and from those from the past and from the future. All the conflicting land titles were resolved to the extent that now the bank itself is even profitable. So this solution has been before the Zimbabwean government when Comrade Shiri was there, and there may be an interest to see whether we can go the same way. Why are we highlighting this? Is the president continuously looks at the optimal way to resolve land issues in such a manner that we can maintain productivity, raise profitability, increase viability, but at the same time address both colonial injustices and issues of compensation for those who may have bought the land, who may have developed it when they were not the original colonizers or occupiers of the land. This is why I keep emphasizing that the president is acting in good faith. And my appeal to white Zimbabweans, those who are being tempted to go to the G40 bandwagon, is to stop it. Please, let's come and talk at home. Don't try to stir the pot in order to please foreign interests, which are fleeting, because at the end of the day, we still have to confront those problems when the situation has not been